The Unfiltered Human on the Fringe episode 46. The Fire of Initiation. Welcome back to the Unfiltered Human on the Fringe. This is the space where we strip away illusions and walk right into the thresholds that shape us. In this episode, we step into fire, not the kind that burns wood, but the kind that burns through who we were, the ordeals, trials, and thresholds that mark transformation. Every culture, from tribal initiations to spiritual traditions, has recognized this, that to grow into something new, something in us must burn away. Initiation is never just about ceremony. It is about rupture, a moment when the old identity can no longer hold, when the safe skin must crack, and when only by stepping into intensity can we emerge with new depth. For some, it comes through ritual, fasting, vision quests, scarification, firewalking. For others, it is life itself that initiates us: illness, heartbreak, collapse, loss. In both cases, the pattern is the same. We are tested, broken, and reshaped. The fire of initiation teaches us that transformation is not polite, not comfortable. It demands surrender. And yet, on the other side of the flames, we often find clarity, purpose, and a more authentic self. In this episode, we'll explore the archetype of initiation, the psychology of ordeal, personal encounters with burning thresholds, and what it means to carry the fire into daily life. Because sometimes the only way to become is to burn. Let's begin the call to the flames. Every true transformation begins with a burning. In ancient societies, initiation rites were not optional ceremonies, they were ordeals, designed to dismantle the old identity and forge a new one. Firewalking, scarification, fasting, sweat lodges, vision quests, each demanded that the initiate endure discomfort, even suffering, in order to return with wisdom and belonging. Modern culture often avoids this. We prefer comfort, convenience, and safety. Yet deep down we know, without some fire we remain untested. The self we cling to never dissolves, and the possibility of a deeper life remains dormant. Initiation, in whatever form it takes, is the threshold where who we were must be burned away, so who we are becoming can step forward. Attributes of initiatory fire: intensity, the heat of challenge that cannot be bypassed. Ordeal, trial by suffering, pain, or endurance. Sacrifice, letting go of what cannot survive the passage. Rebirth, emergence of a new self, clearer and stronger. Belonging, integration into a wider story, community, or purpose. Themes: ritual fire, initiation rites across cultures, the Spartan Agoge, indigenous vision quests, Jewish bar and bat mitzvahs, Christian confirmation. Each carries the same structure: separation, ordeal, reintegration. Life's ordeals, not all fires are ritualized. Illness, heartbreak, betrayal, or collapse often serve as involuntary initiations. The archetype is the same: descent, trial, emergence. Psychological transformation. Carl Jung described individuation as a psychic initiation, the confrontation with shadow, suffering, and self-deception that must be endured before integration. Personal reflection. Looking back, I can see that my own initiation didn't come in a ritual hut or with ceremonial fire. It came through intensity I didn't choose. During my late teens, when I withdrew into long hours of study, I thought I was simply preparing for a career in engineering. But the truth is, I was undergoing my own initiatory fire: isolation, self-doubt, the breaking away from friends, the loneliness of feeling the odd one out. At the time, I thought it was just life pulling me apart from those around me. But in hindsight, I can see it was a threshold. My old identity, shaped by the group, by belonging to the familiar, was being stripped back. I resisted it, felt guilty for saying no to clubs or nights out. But what emerged was a different kind of belonging, one rooted in study, purpose, and a new sense of self. It wasn't glamorous, but it was an ordeal, and it changed me. Psychological insight anthropologist Arnold van Gennep outlined the classic pattern of initiation: separation, liminality, reintegration. First, the initiate is pulled out of ordinary life. Then they undergo an ordeal in a liminal space where the old identity dissolves. Finally, they return, transformed. Victor Turner expanded this idea, showing how liminality is the space where identity is burned and remade. Modern psychology echoes this. Transformative learning theory, Mesero, suggests that real change comes not from comfort, but from disorienting dilemmas, moments that destabilize us so we must reconstruct meaning. Joseph Campbell's hero's journey follows the same arc. The core, the ordeal, the return with a gift. My own initiation into solitude and discipline reflects this. Though not ritualized, it carried the same structure: separation from friends, endurance of loneliness, and eventual reintegration with a sharper identity. The fire wasn't chosen, but it burned away my dependence on external approval and left me with a deeper resource of self. Embodiment prompt or practice. Think back to a time when life initiated you without permission. What was stripped away? What was the ordeal you endured? What new part of you emerged afterwards? Write down these three elements. Notice how, even in suffering, the structure of initiation was present. Seed to plant this week: when discomfort arises, ask yourself, what fire is this inviting me into? Instead of retreating, pause and see whether the flames are burning something away that no longer serves you. Ordeal as transformation. Every rite of passage carries a moment of rupture, a trial, a fire, an ordeal. Whether it is the Spartan boy left in the wild, the vision quest of Native American traditions, or the modern gauntlet of military training, transformation always asks a price. The ordeal is not cruelty for its own sake. It is the crucible where the old self burns away so that something stronger, sharper, or more awake can emerge. The trial that breaks and builds. The paradox is this: we resist ordeals because they wound, but often they are the very wounds that reforge identity. Themes and attributes of ordeal: pain, the shock that forces attention; loss, the stripping away of comfort, certainty, or control; threshold, the sense of crossing into something unknown; reforging, identity reconstructed under pressure; belonging, the bond formed with those who share the trial. Theme 1: Physical ordeals. From fasting to endurance feats, ordeals test the body as a proxy for the spirit. The Desert Fathers, early Christian ascetics, sought holiness through hunger and isolation. Modern athletes find transcendence in exhaustion, running ultramarathons, not only for medals, but for the clarity that comes when the body protests and something deeper takes over. Theme 2: Social ordeals. Initiation often includes separation from the familiar. Adolescents are taken from family to return as adults. Soldiers are broken down in boot camp to be rebuilt as part of a unit. These ordeals strip individual comfort to forge collective identity. Theme 3: Psychological ordeals. Some initiations happen entirely in the psyche. A period of depression, heartbreak, or failure can act as an ordeal, demanding that we confront the parts of ourselves we'd rather deny. Unlike ritualized trials, these ordeals arrive uninvited, but they shape us nonetheless. Theme 4: Transformation through fire. Every ordeal carries the imagery of fire. Destructive, consuming, and yet purifying. Fire destroys, but it also tempers steel and clears forests for new growth. To endure an ordeal is to be seared but not destroyed, to emerge with scars that signify renewal. Personal reflection. In my late teens, I thought transformation would come through study alone, that books, effort, and knowledge were the true rites of passage. But life had other ideas. One of my ordeals wasn't physical pain, but the loneliness of being out of step with my peers. While my friends immersed themselves in clubs and nightlife, I buried myself in engineering studies, often feeling the sting of being the odd one out. At the time, it felt less like a choice and more like exile, a slow burn of alienation that left me questioning my place in the world. Looking back, I see it now as a kind of ordeal. It forced me to endure solitude, to confront my guilt for not fitting in, and to begin building identity outside the herd. It wasn't a ritualized rite, but it carried the same structure: separation, trial, and eventual return with a sharper sense of self. Psychological insight psychologists often describe ordeals as catalysts for transformative learning, the idea that deep change emerges not from comfort, but from disorientation. Jack Meziero's theory shows that when our old worldview collapses, it forces us to reconstruct meaning. Ordeals are precisely these collapses, moments when the ground falls away and we are compelled to grow. From a Jungian perspective, ordeals also act as encounters with the shadow, the repressed or denied parts of the psyche that surface under stress. Trials strip away the masks we prefer, leaving us face to face with what we usually avoid. Where Meziero highlights the collapse of meaning systems, Jung points to the confrontation with hidden parts of the self. Together, they suggest that ordeals are both external and internal thresholds, breaking our frameworks, while also forcing us inward to integrate what we've ignored. Research into resilience and post-traumatic growth builds on this pattern. Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun found that those who endure ordeals often report heightened appreciation of life, closer relationships, a stronger sense of purpose, and a clarified value system. Not everyone grows from hardship, but the potential is seeded in the very act of surviving and making sense of the trial. My own experience of alienation in youth reflects this arc. At the time, being out of step with peers felt like pure loss, a loneliness I didn't choose. But looking back, it became an early rehearsal in independence, a fire that stripped away my reliance on external belonging. That ordeal showed me that sometimes the fiercest initiation is not through dramatic ceremony, but through isolation itself, learning to walk with yourself when the familiar falls away. Embodiment prompt or practice. Think back to an ordeal you have lived through, physical, social, or psychological. Write down what was taken from you in that period, what burned away. Then write what was given in return, what strength, perspective, or clarity you carried out of the fire. Notice how even the most searing experiences leave both wounds and gifts. Integration moment ordeals feel like destruction in the moment, but they are also thresholds. They strip away illusions, break down old forms, and reforge us in fire. To endure is not only to survive, but to cross into a new identity. The question is never just, why did this happen? But what has this made of me? Seed to plant this week, instead of shrinking from difficulty, ask, what if this is my ordeal? Not punishment, not cruelty, but initiation, the fire that tempers who I am becoming. Collective ordeals and communal fire throughout history, rites of passage have rarely been solitary affairs. They were shared trials, hunting expeditions, pilgrimages, vigils, or rituals where the individual's pain was mirrored and witnessed by the group. The fire of initiation is not only personal but collective. Transformation often depends on others standing beside us, enduring alongside us, and reminding us that thresholds are not crossed alone. Themes and attributes of collective ordeals. Belonging, the sense that you are part of something larger than yourself. Witnessing, having your struggle seen and validated by others. Solidarity, suffering alongside others creates unspoken bonds. Rhythm, shared rituals of labor, endurance, or celebration mark the passage of time. Renewal, the return to ordinary life with a changed sense of identity. Collective ordeals often blur the line between hardship and ritual, whether in indigenous initiation ceremonies, military training camps, or the unplanned challenges of modern life. The presence of others transforms difficulty into meaning. Without the group, suffering is just suffering. With the group, it becomes initiation. In traditional societies, young people were often taken away from the village for rituals of endurance, fasting, vision quests, or physical tests. They returned not only changed within themselves, but welcomed into a new role by the community. In modern contexts, this echoes in military boot camps, competitive sports, or even the long vigils of protest movements. The body and mind are tested, but what endures most is the bond forged in shared struggle. Rhythm is crucial. Chants, drumming, repeated labor, these synchronize people into one pulse, dissolving individuality into collective energy. From ecstatic dance to factory work, rhythm shapes the ordeal into something beyond monotony. Renewal follows. After the hardship, there is a re-entry. The story of endurance becomes a shared identity. Survivors do not return as they left. Personal reflection. One of the closest things I've experienced to a collective ordeal happened while working 12-hour night shifts in a print and label factory in Dorby. Through an agency, I was packing and distributing telephone top-up cards for major companies like Vodafone. On paper, it was monotonous, relentless work. But in practice, it became something very different, almost ritualistic. The nights stretched long, fatigue pressed heavy, yet there was a rhythm that bound us together. Around 3 a.m., we'd often order pizza and take our extended break outside. Officially, it was meant to be 30 minutes, but the boss never rushed us back. That extra time mattered. We'd eat, laugh, share stories, and sometimes drift into surprisingly deep conversations under the night sky. I still remember watching the sun rise with the group before heading back in for the final 3 hours. Looking back, it was more than a job. It was a collective rite of endurance, camaraderie, and transformation. We were all in the fire together, tired, tested, but carried by each other's presence. Those nights taught me that initiation doesn't always wear ceremonial robes. Sometimes it shows up in factories at 3 a.m., in the quiet solidarity of people working, eating, and watching the dawn together. The bonds forged in those hours didn't just pass the time, they shaped who I became, leaving me with resilience, perspective, and an appreciation for the strange alchemy of shared trial. Psychological insight psychologists studying rites of passage often highlight the role of communitas, a term coined by Victor Turner, to describe the deep sense of equality and solidarity that emerges in liminal states. When people face hardship together, hierarchies dissolve. A shared humanity rises to the surface. Even in non traditional contexts, the principle holds. Research into group endurance, from disaster survivors to marathon runners, shows that collective struggle amplifies resilience. Endorphins released through shared physical strain, laughter, or exhaustion don't just reduce stress individually, they synchronize moods, creating emotional resonance. This is why factory shifts, military drills, or all night festivals can leave such lasting imprints. The hardship is metabolized communally. The Derby factory nights were, in hindsight, an initiation into this principle. The exhaustion wasn't erased, but it was carried together. The sunrise didn't just signal another day, it marked a subtle rebirth, proof that we had made it through the long night. Embodiment prompt or practice. Recall a time when you went through something difficult with others, a project, a job, a hardship. Write down not just what you endured, but who stood beside you. Notice how the memory of people can sometimes outweigh the memory of pain. Integration moment collective ordeals remind us that the fire of initiation is rarely solitary. We are shaped not only by what we endure, but by who witnesses it with us. The trial matters, but so does the laughter, the food, the stories, the moments of communion in between. The bonds forged in shared fire can outlast the hardship itself, carrying us long after the ordeal has ended. Seed to plant this week: pay attention to the small rituals of belonging in your own life, a shared meal, a team effort, a conversation at the end of a long day. These are not trivial. They are the modern embers of initiation, and they remind us that transformation is often lit by a collective flame. The trial of the self, while collective ordeals shape us through belonging, some initiations can only be faced alone. These are the moments when the group cannot shield us, when encouragement and ritual fall silent, and we are left with the raw confrontation of self. The trial of the self strips away distraction, forcing us to meet the parts of ourselves that we usually outrun. These initiations often come in solitude, vigils, fasts, solitary retreats, or in moments when no one else can make the choice for us. The fire here is inward, a crucible where the ego burns and identity reshapes itself in silence. Themes and attributes of the trial of self: isolation, standing without the buffer of others; vulnerability, exposure to fear, doubt, or weakness; endurance, the capacity to stay when escape feels easier; confrontation, facing one's inner shadows without distraction; emergence, carrying something back that wasn't there before. In many traditions, initiates were sent alone into the wilderness to seek visions, fast without food or water, or spend nights in darkness. The ordeal wasn't meant to punish, it was meant to strip away the noise so that truth could be heard. Modern equivalents may not carry the same ceremony, but the principle endures. Solitude, whether chosen or forced, often cracks us open to ourselves. Isolation. In Lakota vision quests, young men would climb hills alone, fasting for days until a vision arrived. The solitude itself was the test. Modern life rarely gives us true isolation, which is why it feels so daunting when it arrives unexpectedly. Vulnerability. The trial exposes fragility. Without others, there's no external validation to lean on. What remains is an unfiltered encounter with fear, inadequacy, or longing. Endurance. Staying is the essence of initiation. In solitude, hours stretch into landscapes. The self rebels, inventing reasons to leave. Endurance requires courage to stay inside the discomfort. Confrontation. The inward gaze is often harder than outward tests. Initiates confront not monsters but memory, guilt, shame, and the unanswered questions of their lives. Emergence. When the ordeal ends, the initiate does not return empty-handed. Even without visions, something shifts, a sturdier self, a sharper purpose, or simply the knowledge that solitude did not break them. Personal reflection. I faced a few of these solitary trials in my own way. One that stands out came when I first lived in Derby. I had moved into my hall of residence flat on my own, and for the first time there was no one else around to mark the rhythms of life. The silence was thick. Some evenings I'd just lie on the bed, while others I sat still at my desk, feeling every echo of doubt magnified. It wasn't an official rite of passage, but looking back, it carried the same flavour. With no external structure, I had to build my own. I discovered how much I relied on distraction, and how quickly loneliness could morph into self criticism. But over time, that solitude became a forge. I learned to face myself, the parts one avoided, the fears I carried, the voice inside that never stopped demanding. And slowly, that same silence became a companion. It forced me to shape an identity not built on noise or company, but on the inner resources I didn't know I had. Psychological insight psychologists recognize that solitude can act as both a wound and a medicine, depending on how it is entered. Research on enforced isolation, such as solitary confinement, shows how the absence of human contact can become traumatizing, anxiety, depression, and disintegration of self. But when solitude is chosen or held with intention, it becomes a very different crucible, one of creativity, integration, and self discovery. Anthony Storr in Solitude, 1988, argued that time alone is often essential for psychological health, not as withdrawal, but as the very space where imagination and growth take root. Donald Winnicott, from a developmental perspective, described the capacity to be alone as a milestone of maturity, the ability to sit with oneself without collapse, evidence of inner stability rather than weakness. Together, these views suggest that solitude is not an absence of life, but a different form of presence, one that burns away distraction to reveal what usually stays hidden. In psychological terms, the fire of the solitary ordeal works by dismantling defenses. Without the noise of company or constant activity, the psyche has nowhere to hide. Inner voices rise, sometimes painfully, sometimes with unexpected clarity. If endured, solitude shifts from emptiness into depth, producing insights, resilience, and a sturdier relationship to self. My own time in that Derby hall of residence flat mirrored this process. At first, the silence felt oppressive, like a magnifying glass for every insecurity I carried. But slowly, I began to see that the doubts had always been there, they were simply drowned out before. Facing them without distraction reshaped me. What felt like loneliness became initiation. I emerged quieter, steadier, and more capable of carrying myself without needing the constant reassurance of company or noise. The ordeal was not the silence itself, but the confrontation it demanded and the strength it left behind. Embodiment prompt or practice. Choose 1 hour this week to be completely alone, no phone, no distractions, no tasks. Sit in the solitude and simply notice what arises. Does it feel like emptiness, anxiety, peace, or clarity? Treat the hour as a mini initiation, a chance to meet yourself without interference. Integration moment. The trial of the self reveals something paradoxical. That solitude, which feels like abandonment, is often where we encounter our truest ground. Alone, the masks fall. Alone, the unanswerable questions surface. And alone, something begins to change, a small fire burning inward, preparing us to return to others with more presence, depth, and resilience. Seed to plant, when solitude comes, chosen or unchosen, resist the urge to escape immediately. Sit a little longer. Inside the silence, the fire that shapes us. The fire of initiation is never gentle. It strips, it sears, it unsettles. But in its flames, illusions burn away and something truer is forged. Whether in ritual, ordeal, or the unchosen trials of life, each fire teaches us that becoming is not about comfort, but about surrender. To live fully is to carry those embers with us, the scars that remind us, the strength that sustains us, the clarity that guides us. Because sometimes the only way forward is through. This has been the Unfiltered Human on the Fringe. Until next time, may you walk through your fires with courage and return carrying the light. James Miller. If you found value in today's episode, you may also be interested in my broader project, the Inversiverse, a series exploring the hidden architecture of perception, identity, control, and consciousness. Across 20 episodes, the Inversiverse dissects indoctrination, language, media manipulation, dark psychology, belief systems, and the evolution of self in the digital age. You can find all episodes of the Inversiverse on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, and Substack by searching This Place Called Earth. These ideas aren't shared to convince you, but to invite you to think, feel, and perceive more consciously in a world designed to keep you distracted. Overview of the Inversiverse: a journey through the mirrors of mind, culture, and control. Episodes 1 to 3 introduce foundational ideas around indoctrination, perception, and manipulation. Episode 4 explores how language, symbols, and cultural norms are used to shape thought. Episode 5 investigates control systems, media narratives, and the illusion of choice. Episodes 6 to 7 dives into collective belief structures and the psychology of mass behavior. Episode 8 focuses on marketing, control theory, game theory, and critical thinking. Episode 9 covers love, relationships, human mating, gender dynamics, and red-blue pill ideologies. Episode 10 unpacks dark psychology, the occult, Satanism, and the dark triad personality types. Episode 11 The Simulated Self examines identity, ego, and the rise of post-human consciousness. Episode 12 The Spell of the Mind inquires into language, illusion, and physiology of thought. Episode 13 Conscious Seduction journeys through persuasion, propaganda, and the unseen forces of the mind. Episode 14 The Myth of Sanity sheds light on madness, genius, and the edge of perception. Episode 15 The Algorithmic Mind probes influence, identity, and invisible architects. Episode 16 The Noise of Knowing reveals overload, obsession, and the age of infinite information. Episode 17 Belief Machines delves further into language, desire, and the engine of reality. Episode 18 Submerged Signals examines how the unseen shapes the self. Episode 19 The Alchemy Within Traces, Food, Frequency, and the Forgotten Intelligence of the Body. Episode 20 Encoded Flesh scrutinizes and opens up to the forgotten language of the body, DNA, and biological consciousness.